Hello everyone and welcome to the Eat, Burn, Sleep podcast. I'm your host, Yalda Alawi, the founder of the Eat, Burn, Sleep protocol and app, a gut health and anti-inflammation platform which has helped thousands of people around the world reach optimal health levels physically and mentally. In this podcast, I invite various individuals with expertise to share to help you further educate yourself on wellness, physical and mental health. All aspects of health are connected, and I aim to educate you and teach you to tune into your body to become the best version of you inside and out. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Make sure to subscribe and rate it, share it with your friends, and most importantly, keep happy and healthy. Keep listening. I will be sharing a discount code with you at the end of this podcast for the Eat, Burn, Sleep platform memberships. Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Eat, Burn, Sleep podcast. This week I have an amazing woman join us again, Dr. Tamsin Lewis, who's the founder and medical director of Wellgevity. Tamsin is a big brain. She has a BS in neuroscience and the biology of aging. She has done a specialist training in psychiatry and sports medicine, and she also has trained in nutritional and functional medicine. But on top of that, she has a very strong body. She's a former GB elite triathlete and an Ironman triathlon champion. So I have with me here sporty doc Tamsin Lewis.
Thank you so much for the intro. It feels like I haven't lived all those different lives that you've just mentioned. But yeah, we're going to be coming to that today about all those trying to do too many things sometimes and suffering the consequences.
Exactly. We all live and learn. And I find that a lot of people in the wellness space were able to help people the most once we have gone through something difficult, because you develop empathy, and as much as we need the science, we also need empathy to be able to heal other people. So today with Tam, we're going to be talking about the link between immunity and energy levels, the chances of having a burnout, something that people can call adrenal fatigue, but can be expressed through other conditions, but basically very low energy levels, and the link with your immunity. Many people do not link these two things together, and Tam really is an expert in this area. So I thought that having her here with us would shed some light on this crucial topic, particularly to all of you who feel that you could have better energy levels.
Exactly. I think this is a topic that is so important for so many. I think the medical system is still, as you cover, very siloed into treating specific illnesses, and it's not common for people with, for example, glandular fever or long COVID for doctors to link it to their mental health and their energy levels. So I think, this particular age group as well, as we are in our early 40s, is a crucial time for really trying to bulletproof yourself and often also building yourself back from a burnout, because many people present with fatigue, with recurrent viral infections or upper respiratory tract infections or gut infections or IBS. So all of these low-level dysfunctions that drain you on a daily basis, I think they're really poorly identified and treated by conventional medicine, which is why podcasts like this have become popular, and also functional medicine on a whole, integrative medicine, which looks at the whole person, is becoming increasingly sought after.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I remember when I was in nutrition school, we had to say how we would support the different systems, the gastrointestinal system and the brain and the respiratory system. And I really struggled with that because my training was not medicine and nutrition. I did something else. Then I healed myself with my own method. And the way I healed it was to do everything at the same time. Mm-hmm. So for me to then get the marks for the exams and separate the way we're taught in nutrition school or medical school was a bit of a struggle. But actually, what I find is a lot of doctors who veer towards functional medicine the way you have done, they learn to re-put them back together, of treating everything as a whole. So your mental health impacts your physical health and vice versa. Your energy levels can be impacted by your state of mind. So tell us more about what you have discovered in the latest years on this topic.
I think this has been a very interesting time for all of us in this pandemic. I think many people have been taken not just through a physical journey, but an emotional one, and often both, in that our environments have changed quite a lot, and our environments play a huge role in determining how healthy we are and how we feel and function. So, we started off with a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety around a virus that we didn't know. We didn't really know how it's going to behave. We knew that it behaved differently in certain people. So it was like a real-time science experiment, of which many people were casualties, including myself. So I think SARS-CoV-2 has been a big lesson for many doctors as well. And I think that's one of the reasons why consumers, people like you listening to this today, are really trying to take their health into their own hands, not just because the healthcare system is under-resourced and overworked, but because you know your body and you know your environment and you know your stresses. So I think it's super important to become better educated and better aware of your day-to-day sort of habits and dysfunctions, which could be draining you long term. I think a small discussion around long COVID, which is for many people coinciding with potentially verging on the edge of burnout. And I can allude to my story, but there's, I'm many people like me who, had relationship breakdown, who were running a business, who had a small child. It was sleep deprivation, working late nights, possibly not prioritizing my food, but always prioritizing exercise because that was my drug. But many people can be prone to over-exercise as well. You have to actually rest, recover, and re-nourish in order to gain the benefit from it. It's not just the exercise itself. So I think the big lesson for many of us has been that the nervous system, so how we feel and function on a day-to-day basis, how happy we are, how we relate, our relationships, etc., is really can be really impacted by viruses like SARS-CoV-2, but also other viruses that have come into our lives previously, like EBV, which is otherwise known as mono or glandular fever. Many people with chronic fatigue syndrome and ME have been affected by these viruses, and it's not that the viruses per se are necessarily that damaging. It's that your immune system reaction to this virus is inappropriate. So many people think that their immunity is low, but often it's not that it's low. I mean, autoimmunity is an overactivity of the immune system. For example, when it starts attacking itself, it's that the immune system becomes inappropriate, as I said, and also can, with age, just not deal with the pathogen which is the virus or the bacteria in the right way. So it produces chemicals which actually end up attacking your own body, and that can cause a whole stream of problems, including, in your case, you've talked about your hemolytic anemia, for example, but, many people with long COVID have arthritis or joint inflammation. They have inflammation in their brain, which presents as brain fog and memory difficulties. And this concept called dysautonomia, which is where your fight and flight system, your sympathetic nervous system, gets overactivated. And for some people, this has happened with the COVID virus. I think it is augmented, made worse by the impact of the fear, the fear in our news and this sort of general fear-based society that we've had through this COVID pandemic. So to summarize all that, I think we have to be much more aware of the impact of our environment on our physical and mental health, and that is looking at the light we get on a daily basis, daylight, and also artificial light exposure within the day and at night. I think it's important to get appropriate amounts of exercise, as we know, but a range of exercise, as you cover in the platform. To really look at gut health, which I know you cover as well, Yalda, and really you potentially investigate that there's many consumer tests on the market now. and work with a good practitioner. And then to look at the quality of your relationships and the quality of your life. Are you enjoying your life? Is there joy and purpose and passion and strong relationships in your life? And then if you do have long COVID or if you have CFS, ME, there often are coexisting viral infections in the body due to this inappropriate or sort of affected immune response, which can be worked upon and cleared with the practitioner and with specific treatments. So we can cover that too.
Amazing. Thanks so much for all this information. Just to go back to what you were saying about the people who have an overactive sympathetic nervous system. So to all our listeners, as Tamsin said, the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight in us, which we need. We need a bit of cortisol in the morning to go and get things. But what's not great is when it's overactivated, because not only you feel stressed, but also because it shuts down your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest and digest. And if your digestive system is not optimal, then your immunity gets negatively impacted. So what Tamsin has just described is COVID affects the central nervous system, which then in turn raises your stress/cortisol levels, which in turn damages your immunity further. And you're stuck in this vicious circle where your immunity can't get better because your immunity was affected in the first place. So it's really key to take a step back. And to a lot of people, I'm sure, Tamsin, you see this in your practice like I do. They come and they have a cluster of symptoms. And they feel completely overwhelmed going, listen, I have low energy levels, I'm bloated, I've gained weight, I can't recover it, I can't lose it, I've lost hair, my memory is going, I'm more stressed, I can't sleep. And they feel completely overwhelmed because they feel that they have to fix 10, 15 things, when actually the solution is much simpler, is you fix the base.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this concept of nervous system dysregulation, that's when, how you react to your environment is, you are inappropriately, triggered, or you feel anxious, or you feel not safe, essentially. And that is not an ideal state for the body. And I think, there's many reasons why that happens. A lot of people we saw with COVID became triggered. They had past trauma. They had maybe aspects of PTSD. And trauma doesn't have to be, big events, but it could be, a series of events that happened to you in your past, some childhood incidents, some relationship breakups, robberies, fire, all of that kind of thing. But that essentially results in a nervous system that becomes hyperreactive, and that directly affects your immune system. So it starts dropping bombs inappropriately, and that causes tissue damage. Now, Yada, you just mentioned a whole host of symptoms, and that's very common for people to come. Not just women, but men increasingly are recognizing that they don't feel optimal like they used to. They may feel foggy or heavy or overweight or skin rashes or bloating, etc. And all of these are, largely because of the way we are living our lives, the way we interact with people, the lack of light exposure, the lack of sunlight, for example, the way we sit in an office all day with no natural light, the way we eat our foods at lunchtime from, Pret with 5,000 additives, which has an effect on our gut microbiome, which then causes inflammation. And so inflammation then causes, bloating and a sluggish digestion. So it all comes back down to trying to do some of the basics in your day-to-day. And it doesn't have to be every day. I often say to people, take time either at the weekend or when you've got holidays to stack good behaviors, and that really builds up your sort of wellness tank, as it were, which then you can slowly turn the taps on again when you have to go back to the day-to-day life, which could be, rushing to the office, or being on the tube, being in the pollution in cities, for example. But, taking time out of that, going to the country at the weekend, getting your hands in the soil, getting getting a bit dirty, being with animals, all of those things really positively impact your microbiome, the gut flora, which, as we've seen in big studies, has become increasingly narrowed by our lifestyles these days, which are full of, chemicals, additives, pollution, etc. So just thinking back to basics of how we evolved, to be in a bit more in nature and less in terms of chemicals, etc. And also choosing food, local foods or better quality foods where you can, that aren't sprayed with pesticides, which again affect our microbiome, also affect, the microbiome, the gut affects our skin, our hormonal balance, which then affects our self-esteem, because then we get, spots or rosacea or other kind of skin problems. So all of this is a big loop back down to pointing at self-care. So prioritizing time for you, time for your relationships, time for things that bring you joy, time for deeper sleep and the things that encourage deeper sleep, not, over-exercise, not forcing yourself into a gym environment to do exercise that you don't inherently enjoy, because that inherently is stressful. So it's all a big loop. I often encourage people into breath work because it's been shown to be very beneficial for the parasympathetic nervous system, which signals safety to our nervous system. It's like you are safe, you are fine, you're not running from a tiger, which essentially is how the parasympathetic thinks we are. Cortisol levels lower, adrenaline lowers, and it also opens up your brain. It takes you out of this, what we call default mode network. So it actually opens you up to more experiencing and less of the doing. So that I use an app called The Othership. No relationship with them. I just learned about it through Ben Greenfield and have fallen in love with it because it's got such a range of breath work. But, anything you can do to really do that kind of practice. It could be 10 minutes a day. I use red light therapy as well, which has a positive effect on the brain. Infrared saunaing improves detox, improves mitochondrial function, therefore energy production. So all of these things are interlinked. We're like one big interwoven systemic massive organelles and neurons. So think about that on a day-to-day.
Thank you so much for all these tips. I've actually made a resolution for 2023, which I'm sticking to. Ebb and flow. You know how it is when you have a resolution. It's never, you don't, never stick to it all the time. But I try to, I've massively reduced my screen time. And it's incredible the impact on my stress levels. So what I do is I'm a bit tough with myself. I'm allowed screen time on my computer because that's work up to a certain time of the day, obviously. But phone can start being work, particularly for someone like me on Instagram. And before you know it, you're scrolling on Reels and you've wasted an hour of your time.
Yeah.
You've spiked your cortisol levels. Mm-hmm. And also humans, it's amazing if you can get to the countryside at weekends and all of that. But if you live in a city, try and look far away. So humans, ancestrally, when they couldn't have vision that was very far, that signaled to the brain that they were in danger. So us looking at phones which are 20 centimeters, 30 centimeters from our eyes all day, every day, just that, forget about the blue screen, just looking at something that close to us spikes cortisol levels like crazy. Yeah. And I've been quite tough with myself, and I deal with myself like I deal with my children when it comes to screen time.
It's difficult because we're all meant to be uber on now and answering, if we don't answer an email in an hour, someone thinks we're ignoring them. I mean, it's incredible the way our society is wired now.
Yeah, but I think it's very important to, establish those boundaries, yep. Do everything in one go, and maybe separate the phone from the computer. So this is something I've done. I do work emails from the computer, so I'm sat down, it's work, I'm not stressed on the go between two things, having to reply to an email.
Yeah.
I do that when I'm sitting down doing work, and the phone becomes for other things, but it's my phone screen time that I monitor, because I have noticed that it is where a lot of us waste time and gain more stress for no purpose, really.
And it takes us away from, the activities that really do benefit our health, which is, reading to our kids or playing a game with or calling a friend or going for a walk. I think the damaging effects of technology mostly the phone are only just becoming learned about. I think it's astonishing, like the amount of, and I used to think this is all rubbish and, you can take it to extremes and walk around in a tinfoil hat. But, the EMF, the electronic magnetic, frequencies in our environment, which potentially are damaging our health long term and our nervous systems and our hormonal balances, we don't really know the impact of that. And I think it's going to be increasingly learned about as, we have an epidemic of disease, like how many people that you meet and bump into in London actually feel genuinely well, or other major cities. I think it's a lot easier to feel and function better, and if you are if your environment is much more conducive. The caveat to that is that loneliness is not good for our nervous systems, our emotional health and our longevity. So you have to strike a balance between being busy and engaged and have good friendships and quality relationships with, being surrounded by artificial light and EMF and 5G and all of that. So I think just being more aware of that and the impact that has on your health, for sure.
So if you had 5 tips for people who live in cities of little things that they can implement throughout the week, rather than throughout the day, because I feel that, it's important to not put too much pressure on ourselves, because otherwise that's stressful and that creates health anxiety, and then we become unhealthier. So it's all about, that's why my method is not about perfection, it's about damage limitation, because if you go about perfection, then you end up stressed and then it's counterproductive. But if you had 5 tips to give to people who live in cities, what would they be?
I think the number one is trying to get natural light in the morning. Even on days like this where it's pretty grey outside, you can walk out in the morning or just walk out into your balcony or backyard and get 3 or 4 minutes of light into your system. And what that does is reduce melatonin production, which you've been producing overnight, and increases a bit of cortisol, which, like you say, you need in the morning. But it also it can improve serotonin function. So getting some light in your eyes in the morning, like don't wake up and put sunglasses on if there's a bit of sun, don't stare at the sun, but just trying to get outside. Or, that's a super important one. Not looking at your phone first thing when you wake up. I know it's super hard, especially, I wear a Oura ring, I think you wear an Apple Watch, but, looking at your sleep scores and that kind of thing can send an inappropriate signal to your nervous system. So just hold off, even for it's a couple of minutes. Just get up, use the bathroom, clean your teeth, look at yourself in the mirror, state an intention for the day, but then look at your phone. I think we've become like an extension of our phone, and I think that is potentially quite damaging for us. Then it would be getting some time in, we say nature, but cities do have parks. They have access to some greenery. So, if you can just divert your way to work, or if you can, postpone your morning meeting until you've done a little bit of exercise, preferably outside, that is a really good way to start the day. And it doesn't have to be, a run or, something strenuous. It could be, one of your classes, or I often do, like the class in New York, they offer some really interesting online content and different amounts of sort of energetic work. So I often do that. And then I think we're on to number 4. I would really try and take a packed lunch or some kind of food, like if you are not in the house in the day, something like you do with leftovers. I often do that. I take some leftover veg. I will always have a protein. I tolerate dairy, so I'll have like cottage cheese and seeds, and if you like fruit powders, like which are extra polyphenols, good for the gut. And some apple cider vinegar. So always try and prioritize a decent meal, and don't necessarily go for the Pret option or whatever the fast food takeaway is. And then when you come back in the evening, or just to sort of like sense a boundary between the end of the workday and going into some rest and relaxation. It's, doing maybe just 5 minutes of breath work, maybe just like taking time away from your phone, 5 to 10 minutes with your loved one or your kids or your partner, anyone, and just to sort of signal the end of the day so that your nervous system knows that it's going down into rest and digest. Use night mode on your phone and your computer for sure, taking the blue light out of the devices, including the TV. There's a lot of blue light on your TV. So, a lot of these biohackers wear blue light blocking glasses. They're quite available now. They just take the blue light out of the TV and all of the devices, which then signals to your nervous system that it's going towards sleep and improves melatonin production. So you get a deeper, more recuperative sleep.
Those sound very achievable.
Achievable. Like,
very
people think
achievable.
Health is expensive and you have to throw 1,500 supplements down your gut. But if you just do those basics, it's sending a signal, as I keep going on, to your nervous system that, life is okay, life is achievable, and it doesn't feel like it's constantly in this wide state of dysfunction and having to react. That's when disease happens.
Yeah, there's something else that I do a lot of, which is another form of earthing and grounding. So I'm lucky to live in London, so I walk through the park almost on a daily basis. But also whenever I feel stressed, and that's why I started creating recipes, because I noticed that when I was cooking, I was calming down. I think because it's a creative process, but then further down the line, I realized that gardening, cooking, you're touching vegetables is a form of earthing.
Yep.
So we calm down when we touch things that come out of the soil.
Yeah.
And, I have like 280 recipes on the platform. Recently, I was talking to a PR person who asked me, said, "Oh, you have a fantastic collection of recipes. Who helps you create them?" I said, "I've done them all."
Yeah.
But it's not work. No. Whenever I create a recipe for the platform, for me, it's not work. It's relaxing time.
Yeah.
When I'm
like
stressed,
meditation.
I go to the kitchen when I'm stressed.
That's good. I mean, that's, something we just don't do enough, or we don't allow ourselves the time, and we get takeaway meals and stuff. But you're right. If you think about cooking not as a time drain, but as a therapeutic process, then we're more likely to do it. And I would agree. It's the same with actual hands-on time with your loved ones, like touch is so underestimated, the importance of touch and holding hands and hugging and, stroking cats and dogs and all of those things are very beneficial for our health. And I think underlooked, because we always just used to do it. And now we're so time-starved, we're looking at sort of efficiency in every aspect of our day. But that is actually... we're not designed to be this uber efficient robot. We are humans, and I think that's been neglected.
I totally agree with this. And actually, during the pandemic, we all realized how much we needed other people. I remember when, of course, not seeing people, not only our immunity got impacted negatively, but as you say, not touching, lack of oxytocin, serotonin, all these feel-good hormones. I remember when they reopened the stores in London, I went to Harrods, and because I love beauty, and so I went to buy some face creams. I was so sick of buying things online. And I stayed at the counter chatting with a girl for about half an hour. And in my head, I was laughing. I was like, oh my God, she misses clients. And I miss talking to people I don't know. We just couldn't stop. I was there forever. And when normally I would just have gone through and done things and look at my list and tick, okay, that's done. The pandemic was amazing in that sense. So post-pandemic, I started saying yes to many more invitations. I really valued human connections much more. That was a big learning curve for me, because I've always been social, but I was more geared towards efficiency pre-pandemic. And post-pandemic, I'm now seeing a lunch with a friend or a coffee or a catch-up as efficiency. So it goes into my to-do list.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think we have to prioritize that, or we risk getting to an older age and being, a miserable version of ourselves. And we all see people in these biohacking spaces that, do end up stacking all their hacks until they, and forgetting the basics of being human, and we haven't evolved to lose our humanity yet.
So I saw on your website that you're about not biohacking, but bioevolving. What did
Bioharmony.
Oh, yeah. So tell us more about that.
Well, I've been in this space quite a long time. The reason I got into off-piste medicine and looking at integrative medicine was because I did a triathlon in Thailand with Ben Greenfield, who's quite famous in that space, one of the early adopters of biohacking back in, 14 years ago or something. And I got, obsessed with the data and obsessed with looking at my blood work and then, supplementing and changing different aspects of my life. And then I, over the years have realized that you can feed yourself the best diet, the most expensive supplements. You can do everything by the book. But if you lack joy and purpose and sort of expressionless, emotional expression, and I come at this from the world of athletics and sport as well, where it's very driven and very dopamine and testosterone and this. And actually, I, through practical experience and clinical experience being a physician, I've observed the healthiest people, and they are not the people who are lining up their 14 supplements and their vegan cuisine. They are the people that immerse themselves in life, enjoy life. They don't beat themselves up for the glass or two of wine. They really do engage with life and with people and don't sweat the small stuff. So I've really learnt a lot from that. So thinking about the biohacking world, I came out of it because I thought that it was driving obsession and addiction, and actually a lot of people were coming at it who were former addicts of I won't mention names, but drugs and alcohol, and actually then going into this cross addicting into more socially acceptable forms of addiction like exercise and supplements, and hacking themselves into states of feeling better, when actually your harmony is more about working with your body, like coming into your body. And it sounds a bit pseudo spiritual, but a lot of people live in their heads and not feeling their way through life. And I've learnt that the healthiest people are really in touch with themselves and their feeling, and they're not easily moved. So bioharmony is about more playing with your intuition, doing a lot more holistic practices, like I do say breath work, but softer, not all the Wim Hof, adrenaline type breath work. And just learning to be kind to yourself a bit more and recognizing when things are out of balance. And as we started this conversation, when one thing goes out of balance, like when your nervous system is out of balance because you're sleep deprived, or relationships are toxic, then other things go out of balance. So recognizing that and looking at how you pull the strings back to a state of harmony.
I'm so glad you're talking about this. I completely agree. So as many of people who are listening know, I came to this space because I was very ill myself. And then I started Eat, Burn, Sleep. When I was healing myself, it's way before social media. So, before this whole biohacking stuff. And when I started being on social media and people were sending me accounts of other people, I was looking, I'm like, this is completely obsessive. I could never do this. It's extreme, and anything extreme, as I've learned through my own experience, can really inflame you. Mm-hmm. Any extreme sports, any extreme diet, any extreme calorie counting, any extreme dipping yourself in the cold every day, too much. Mm-hmm. So recently, I was walking through Hyde Park, and there are all these people who swim in the Serpentine, and it was a day where it was -2. It was there was ice on the Serpentine, and people were swimming, doing wild swimming. And I put a story on Instagram saying, this is my idea of hell.
Exactly.
And also from a scientific standpoint, I know that it can really damage women particularly and their hormonal health, and impact anyone with a low thyroid. The last thing you want to do is put yourself in the cold. Much better to have warmth. Anyone with a cold composition in Chinese medicine. And then not long after, actually, there was an article saying middle-aged women are advised against doing this because someone had some cardiovascular issue when she did it. And also because it is so extreme. So what I like doing is do a sauna, come out, have a cold shower, come back in the sauna, come out, have a cold shower, or finish your bath or your morning shower with a bit of cold to, stimulate your lymphatic system, enhance your immune system. But there's no need to go and do extreme things. And I find that a lot of these health advocates are in a very extreme space, and it can put other people off who then want to take no steps to get better. And I'm not sure if it's helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree, because they look at people who are, in the serpentine at that temperature and say, I'd never be able to do that, and therefore that world is so inaccessible to me. But actually, like you say, extremes are not the way. I think some people are designed to, the David Goggins of the world, maybe they are designed to, there's always going to be a 1% that push the boundaries of what is possible. But, I don't think that's applicable to the general human. As you say, all of these stressful situations, of which cold water swimming is one, excessive saunaing is another one. It's a little bit of these things cause a beneficial reaction. You adapt, you get stronger mentally and physically, more resilient. But if you're living your day putting yourself in these, not nice, stressful situations, your cold shower, your work meeting, there's no place where your body kind of goes, oh, I'm okay, because at the end of the day, we are wired to survive. And if we're constantly feeling that we're, if we're stressed, we're going to be detrimental. It's going to cause detrimental effects. And I see that with the biohackers of the world, with their, and, I have some of this myself, circulation issues and their, the thinning of their hair and the sagging of the skin. And then, they'll come up with another expensive stem cell treatment to hack their way through it. So, yes, I think we should encourage much more of a holistic, harmonizing approach.
Mm-hmm. That's why actually on the Eat, Burn, Sleep method, the first week you're not allowed to exercise because oftentimes it's a change of dietary habits for people. And I thought to myself, doing both dietary changes and bringing exercise, which is very good for you, but also spikes your cortisol levels a little bit. Let's just bring it in the second week in order not to shock the body.
Yeah. I think that, when you go away on these cleanses or these expensive, German clinics, then people, often don't exercise very much because they're in a calorie deprivation state, or they're cleansing. So I would agree that we shouldn't be forcing ourselves into over exercising all the time, but a little bit is good for our mental health as well as our. I guess we should say one thing, and I know you comment on this too, is that lean body mass. So, I think going out running, jogging every day, just because you always have done, over the age of 40, isn't something that we should probably be thinking about. We need to look at preserving lean body mass. That's muscle mass, because it's protective of our bones. It actually produces hormones, including testosterone and growth hormone. So I really try and encourage people to look at their muscle mass, especially as they hit 40 and over.
Yeah, I used to be addicted to running.
Yeah.
And after I had my first child, I went to see the physiotherapist. And he said to me, what kind of exercise do you do? I said, I love going and running for an hour. And he looked at me, he said, do you want to lose your bladder control by the time you have your second kid? He just needed to say this.
Yeah.
And I stopped, and I replaced with other things like my workouts and walking, because actually that also preserves muscle mass, which is what I've learned over the years. And recently I was looking, actually this morning, you know how Apple on your phone you have memory photos that pop up?
Yeah.
So a picture of me in 2014 where I'm 2 or 3 kilos lighter than now, and I'm in a bikini by a pool, but I had much less muscles. I'm like, oh my God, I look fitter now, and I'm older and I'm heavier than then, because I didn't, I was not consistent the way I am now with movement. And obviously above the age of 35, muscle mass and bone mass goes down. So I agree with you. It's so important to preserve it.
And to feed it, right? If we don't feed it with adequate protein, we're not going to maintain muscle mass. And I think it becomes a lot harder when I think 40 is the sort of the turning point. I think in our 30s we get away with a lot more, but we should be more aware of it in our 30s. But yeah, once we hit 40, then estrogen starts to decline. I think that's when we but like I say, we often need a lot more protein than we think, so I think looking at sources of protein and being aware that vegetable sources of protein are less bioavailable than meat sources. So I think, that's a whole different topic, but just being aware of that.
I talk about this a lot. I'm so glad you're mentioning it. Yes. When I try and help people one-on-one, I talk about this quite a bit, where you need the full chain of amino acids, not only for your hair, your skin, but for your bones, for your muscles, for your gastrointestinal lining. So it's so important. And the problem with meat is there's a study that shows that excess processed meat consumption was linked to colon cancer because it putrefies in the colon. But if we're talking about unprocessed, good quality, a serving of the size of the palm of your hand, we're not being extreme. It's like comparing pears and apples. So it's so important for all of us to always think about the fine details, because that's where health lies. It's all about details.
Yeah, I think people forget, and then they'll have like a soup for lunchtime and a piece of sourdough bread, and they'll do the intermittent fasting, so they haven't eaten until then, and then they'll get to dinner and maybe have a small piece of fish, and that's like 35% of the needs of your protein for the day. And then the people wonder why their brain doesn't feel as good and their muscles don't feel as strong. So even adding nuts and seeds, and if you can supplement, I use organic goat whey, and I tolerate it very well occasionally if I've been to if I've exercised. So just being aware of where you can get additional protein, and collagen, bone broths, those kind of things are really good. But if you're having a vegetable soup for lunch, you're not going to be meeting any protein needs.
Exactly. On those good words, where can people find you, Tamsin?
I'm Dr. Tam, DRTAM, on Instagram. Many people think I'm Asian since I switched my name. I was Sporty Doc, but I moved on from that because I didn't want to limit myself, given that I'm no longer a professional athlete. And also wellgevity.com is our web domain where we have a team of functional medics and GPs available.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I hope it helps our listeners. Make sure to share with other people this episode if they need to listen to it. And if you feel tired, low in energy and bloated, all the things we've mentioned, just take it one step at a time, one change at a time, until you take yourself to a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Yada, for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Of course, thanks. Thank you for listening to the Eat, Burn, Sleep podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to share it and to subscribe. If you are ready to become the best version of you, use the code PODCAST15, PODCAST15 for 15% discount on the Eat, Burn, Sleep memberships. Available on eatburnsleep.com.